So we're continuing from bottom of Chesam and Beis, the bottom line. Amar Rabba Shachat Tzipor me'erev Yamtav ve'in mechasen Aisai b'Yamtav. If you shecht a tzipor, a bird on erev Yamtav, you do not cover the blood on Yamtav. Okay, and the point is that you don't have to in order to eat it. That's Rashi. So, and there's no issue of Simchas Yamtav over here because the bird's already shechted, and therefore you are not allowed to be over any serum to cover the blood. Okay, Galgal, and then on a related topic, Gilgal Isa Me'erev Yamtav, if you needed literally rolled a dough from Erev Yamtav, Mafish Mimena Chalas of Yamtav, so that you could separate Chala on Yamtav. Okay, and Rashi says even though you're not allowed to separate Chuma or Meiser on Yamtav, it's a Derabanan. So here though, when the Rashi explains that part of Simchas Yamtav is to have fresh hot bread, and therefore to make bread you need to separate Chala. That being the case, being that on Yamtav itself you're definitely allowed to bake bread, one of these steps is to take off Chala. So therefore you're allowed. Okay. And also there's no, in other words, the Chacham will not keep the keep the gzera of not taking off truma will not put in place if that will get in the way of Simchas Yamtav. Difference is that by shechting a bird, by covering the blood, the isurim are already in place, and for that, so for muksa the Chacham say there's no issue, but the real isurim you're not allowed to be over. Okay, so. Now, Avu the Shmuel Amar, the father of Shmuel said, "Afilu galgal isa me'erev Yamtav, even if you needed dough erev Yamtav, ein mafresh mena chalasa Yamtav." Reason is because the only heter was for bread which was needed on Yamtav, that you could remove the dough. But if it was needed erev Yamtav, so then there's no heter. So Gemara says, "Lema pligas de Shmuel ad Avu." Let us say Shmuel is arguing on his father. The Amar Shmuel, because Shmuel says, Chalas should be Chuma bechutz laaretz. So taking off Chala of chutz laaretz, which is only derabanan. Eichel v'hoilech, you are allowed to eat it and continue. Ve'achar kach mafresh, and then after you're finished, just take off a little piece at the end and separate that as Chala. In other words, you do not have to separate it before you start. And therefore we see it's not considered being mesakin the eichel when you take off challah, being that you're allowed to eat it even before you take it off. And that being the case, there's no issue taking it off on Yom Tov. The whole issue to take off challah on Yom Tov is that you're being mesakin the bread. So here, though, we see Shmuel says that you're not being mesakin anything. You can take it off at the end, and you could even eat the bread even before you take it off. So there's no problem of being mesakin. So there's no way to do it. So, which would imply that you couldn't take off challah on Yom Tov, and there's no problem, which would be arguing on his father. So Amar Rava says, Mi loy maida Shmuel shim kara la Hashem she'asul lazar. No, because wouldn't Shmuel be maida, wouldn't he admit that if you were kari shame on this challah, that it's asur tizarim, that you do, in other words, that you do not, even though you don't have to separate, but still once you take it off, once you separate challah, it gets a kedusha, and that being the case, it should be included in the gzera of not taking off tumah or meiser. Even though there is you're not being mesakin it, still it should still be included in the gzera. Because once the chumr guys are not to take off tumah or meiser, so then challah is also included. Okay, which brings us to the Mishnah. You're not allowed to move the ladder. We'll discuss what type of ladder from one dove coat, one place where they're nesting, to another. They had a big building where they would have many windows. Each one had a nest for a different bird. Okay, and they would go there and lay eggs. And okay, fine. So but you could tilt it from one window to another window, so you can't carry it from outside from one building to another building, but you could, inside each shevach, inside each building, to tilt the ladder from one window, one nesting area to another. Raizel Matir, and Raizel says it is mutter. Okay, so we'll explain the machlekes. Okay, and the point is, you need these birds for Simchas Yom Tov to have what to eat, and still Beis Shammai says it's aser, and the Gemara will explain. So, okay, so the Gemara says, Amarav.
Sorry, what was the problem about moving the ladder?
Could be tercha, and could be, yeah,
okay, all right.
Yeah,
Patience.
right.
I thought I missed it. I wasn't.
That's true.
Catching up.
The Gemara will say, yeah. Hey, really, that's how the one starts off. Sorry. So, Amar Rav Chanan Bar Ami, Rav Chanan Bar Ami says, Machlekes Rishus Harabim. The Machlekes is in Rishus Harabim, carrying it across Rishus Harabim. The Beis Shammai Savri Haraya Aimer, the one who will see, will say, La Tiach Gagai Hu Tzarech, you need to plaster your roof. Okay. No, the fact that the ladder is a ladder of a shevach, Rashi says it looked different. You could tell by looking at the ladder that it was a shevach ladder. It was made for the birds. So, okay, so it's mutter. And keep in mind, it's Yom Tov, so there's no issue of carrying. So, aval b'rishus hayachid divrei kol mutter, but in rishus hayachid, in your private property where no one could see you, so everyone agrees it is mutter. No one will come to make the mistake. Okay, so Gemara says, v'ha'amar Rav Yehud. Eini, so Gemara says, Eini itself, v'ha'amar Rav Yehuda Amarav, chamakam she'asu chachamim mipnei maras ayin, and wherever the chacham said it's also because of maras ayin, like in this case, that the whole isser is, people will think you're plastering your roof. Afilu b'chadri chadar masor, even in your chambers, it is aser. There's no, even if no one could see you, it's still aser. So Gemara says, Tanahi, in fact, it's a machlekes. Tanayim, this statement of Yehuda Amarav, the Tanya was learned in a BEITZA. Shadichan bechama, if your clothing gets wet this is on Shabbos, really. Mm-hmm. So you're allowed to spread them out in the sun, avaloi keneged ha'am, not in front of people. Otherwise, people will suspect you of laundering, doing laundry on Shabbos. So you can't spread it out in front of people in the sun on Shabbos. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon say it is aser, even in private. And so we see over here the machlekes is Tanakama holds that something which is aser because of maras ayin, in private you could do it. And Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon say no, it's aser. And therefore that would fit in well with the machlekes. That would fit in well with Rav Chanan Bar Ami. That he'll say that machlekes is in Rishus Harabim, Rishus Yachid. Everyone agrees it's okay because he holds like the Tanakama. Okay, so Ikadami, those who say it as follows differently. Amar Rav Chanan Bar Ami. Just the opposite. Machlekes b'Rishus Hayachid. The machlekes is in Rishus Hayachid. The Beis Shammai islahu the Rav Yehuda Amarav. Beis Shammai holds of Rav Yehuda Amarav that anything that is also because of maras ayin you can't even do it in private. Beis Hillel leislahu the Rav Yehuda Amarav, and Beis Hillel does not hold of Rav Yehuda Amarav. And they'll tell you that no, in private you could do it. Aval b'Rishus Harabim divrei kol aser. In Rishus Harabim, everyone agrees it's aser. There is an issue of maras ayin over here. So Gemara says, Lema Rav Damar Beis Shammai. Is it possible that Rav holds of Beis Shammai? It can't be, and therefore that cannot be pshat in Rav, and therefore it will come out that Rav Chanan Bar Ami is actually arguing on Rav, not agreeing. So Gemara says, no. So the question is, so how will Rav Chanan Bar Ami explain Rav? Because according to Rav, in other words, Rav would not paskin against Beis Hillel. And if Beis Hillel says it's aser in Rishus Hayachid, we'll say it's mutter in Rishus Hayachid, how does that fit in with Rav, who says that any issur because of maras ayin is aser even in Rishus Hayachid? So Gemara answers Tanahi, in fact, it's a machlekes Tanayim, and the Tanya as we learned in a BEITZA, Shaitchin bechama, avalai keneged ha'am, you could spread it out in the sun, but not in front of everyone, and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon say it's aser, and therefore Rav Chanan Bar Abba will tell you that will tell you that Rav in fact holds like the Tanakama, and who says there is no issue in Rishus Hayachid. Okay, so in other words, even though Rav himself says that in Rishus Yachid it is also, he'll tell you that Beis Hillel goes like that man the Amar, it goes like the Tanakama. Okay, so fine. So the Gemara says Masisin is like Yaitana. So now that we have a Mishnah, so we're saying our Mishnah does not fit in with this Raizel. The Tanyas we learned in Brisa. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Maidim Beishamai and Beis Hillel Shamaydlichin es Hasulam Mishayvech l'Shayvech. Beishamai and Beis Hillel are both Maida that you are allowed to move the ladder from one Shayvech to another Shayvech. La neflaku el lahachzir. They only argue regarding returning it to its place, because the bringing it from Shayvech to Shayvech you need it for Simchas Yom Tov, so that's allowed according to everyone, and just bring it back to where it started. You don't need that for Simchas Yom Tov. So in that case, it will actually be aser. So, okay. So people, meaning when you bring it back, people will, okay. It's not l'tzarech Yom Tov and it's a tercha, so that will be aser. So Beishami Amir Me'ein Machzirin, because Beishami will tell you you're not allowed to return it. It's a tercha, it's aser. Raizel Amir Ma'af Machzirin, now you can even bring it back. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, what are we talking about? Besulam shel shayvach, we're speaking about a sulam of a shayvach. Aval besulam shel aliyah divrei karl aser. But a sulam of an aliyah, meaning one that you usually use to go up and down stairs from one place of living to another. So, meaning from the chatzar up to where their entrance to their house is. So everyone will agree it is aser. Reason being because this ladder is more. If you're carrying this type of ladder, people will think you're for sure coming to a Class A roof. It's not made for the shavach. Yeah. Okay. So Rabbi, so for the shayvach, a shayvach ladder, everyone agrees is mutter, even to is to take it back, and the machlekes is only by a sulam shel aliyah. Sorry, no, other way around. Sorry, everyone agrees by sulam shel aliyah it's aser, and the machlekes is by sulam shel shayvach. Could you return the ladder? Rabbi Daisa says mateu michalayin lachalayin. You could tilt it from one window to another window. And Achim say mishum Rabbi Daisa, in the name of Rabbi Daisa af medadin by you could even. Rashi says like walk it. You could move one leg at a time slowly. And there's no issue. Okay, so Bnei Rabbi Chia Nafuk the Karyasa, the sons of Rabbi Chia went to the villages. Rashi says to look at their fields, see how they were doing. So Kiyasu, when they came, when they came back, so the fathers asked them, Klum Ma'isa Baliyadchem, did you have any shilos when you were there? So Amrulai Sulam Baliyadenu, someone asked us about a sulam, if we allowed to move it from shayvach to shayvach, I believe. So v'hitanu, and we were mater it. Yeah, and Rashi says it was speaking about a sulam shel aliyah, carrying it to a shayvach. So it started off outside the shayvach, and they allowed him to carry it into the shayvach.
If you ever fooled around with ladders, you have to really adjust them. So if you're tilting it, then you're leaving. So
Be careful.
It's dangerous. You're allowed to tilt. You have to do the whole thing. That's the way I'm thinking.
Yeah, no. Tilt just
very critical. Like it's dangerous otherwise.
What's the problem with tilt?
Well, he holds by that you're allowed to tilt. What do they mean by?
No, it just means moving around. Sorry, it doesn't literally mean tilt. It means put it on the ground also.
At the slightest movement of a ladder, you do that. It's dangerous.
Sorry. Tilt doesn't just mean just to tilt it up. It means also to
go
move
from
it.
one dove cut on one side and the other side. It just get over this.
No, you could also move it over, meaning inside.
So these holes you can move it.
Yeah, for sure.
Trying to delineate.
No, for sure. Sorry,
Yeah.
I should have said that. Yeah. Tilt doesn't. Tilt just means to, as opposed to carrying it outside. I mean, you carry it around inside from one to the next. Yeah, that's not a problem. Sorry, I should have said. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So it says they had a ladder. Someone asked them about a ladder that a sulam shel aliyah that they carried from the outside to the shevach. So he didn't know, and we were matrit because we're okay. So Amalahem. And the Gemara will explain if Rabbi Yehuda said very clearly that everyone agrees it's usher. So why? What were they thinking? So Amalahem. So he said to them, Rabbi Chia said to them, "Seuva astru mashi tartum, go back and tell them it's usher that which you said it was mutter." So what were they thinking? Inu saver they held midika Amar Rabbi Yehuda b'sulam shaliyah loy pligi, from the fact that Rabbi Yehuda says that a sulam shaliyah Hillel and Meshami both agree it is usher, even to take it. So Miklal the Tanakama saver pligi, implying that the Tanakama held that in fact that is the machlekes, and by a sulam shaliyah, in fact, they held that the Tanakam would say that a sulam shel shevach everyone agrees is mutter, and sulam shel aliyah that will be the machlekes Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, and everyone that everyone agrees that you're allowed to take it there, but not to bring it back according to Beis Shammai. So, but both Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai agree according to the Tanakama that you could bring it there, even a sulam shel aliyah. So the Gemara says, "V'loi," in fact, it's not true. Rabbi Yehuda Taimei de Tanakama Kamafarish. Rabbi Yehuda is explaining the reason of the Tanakama. The Tanakama said a statement which could be taken either way, a sulam shel aliyah, sulam shel shevach, and Rabbi Yehuda says no, it's specifically a sulam shel aliyah. Shevach, shel shevach that you're allowed to move. Okay, so Gemara says, what do we see this from? Because it says you're allowed to move the ladder from shevach to shevach, which and if you will think that we're speaking about a sulam shel aliyah, it shouldn't say you move the ladder from shevach to shevach. It should say you're allowed to take the sulam to the shevach, because we're starting from outside the shevach. So rather, this is what the mission is. This is what the BEITZA meant. Shal shevach in shel aliyah. The ladder of a shevach, you are allowed to move it, bring it there from one shevach to another shevach, and just to return it, that's machlekes. And shel aliyah, but everyone agrees the ladder of an aliyah you cannot bring it even there from the aliyah to the shevach, because people will think you are using it to plaster your roof. Okay. V'idach, and the other ones, the sons of Rabbi Chia, they thought that wasn't a good proof, because mikatani sulam shel shevach, mi shevach l'shevach katani. It doesn't say it's a sulam shel shevach. It doesn't say you carry a sulam shel shevach. It says you carry it from a shevach to a shevach. V'afilu l'kama shevchin, and this means, and they thought that meant you could take a sulam shel aliyah to a shevach, and from there you could take it even to another shevach, to many shevchin. And this is not just limited to these first shevach. Okay. So that's the first way of saying over what happened, the story. So Ikadamri, there are those who say the story happened differently. Amrulai, the sons of Rabbi Chia, said to him, Hitoi sulam shaliyah b'liadenu, the tilting literally meaning moving between shevchim. Sorry, not between shevchim. In a, meaning Rashi says they took it to the shevach before Yom Tov, and they allowed them to tilt, in other words, move from one window area inside the shevach, not from shevach to shevach, inside each shevach, to tilt, meaning to move it from one window to another window,
even though it was a sulam shel aliyah.
Yes, exactly. So even though it was a sulam shel aliyah, yes. So Gemara says, so it came. So so moving inside the shevach. So a sulam shel aliyah came to our hands, and we said it was mutter. So he said to them, go back and make it asr that which you said it was mutter. In fact, it's asr. So again, what's the machlekes? Inu saver, they held my deka asar tanakama kashari Rabbi Daisa. That which the Tanakama, in other words, Rabbi Yehuda, that which Rabbi Yehuda says it was asr, moving a sulam shel aliyah, they thought that Rabbi Dosa was actually mater. It says Rabbi Dosa Aimer Mateu Mechalain Lechalain, and they thought that meant that's going back on a sulam shel aliyah. Rabbi Yehuda says it's also completely to move, and Rabbi Dosa said no, you can move it around inside a shayvach. That's mateu, you could literally tilt it. In fact, it's not true. In fact, Rabbi Dosa was actually going back on the first part of the brisa, that where Rabbi Yehuda said that, or Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both agree that you're allowed to move it from shayvach to shayvach, and comes along Rabbi Dosa and says, no, even there we will make a gzera. People will think you are coming to plaster your roof, and in fact, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel only allowed you to carry around inside the shayvach, not from shayvach to shayvach.
No one's talking about the shal yet.
Right, exactly. So, in fact, actually, Rabbi Dosa would actually be arguing on Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, because Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel say very clearly, you can carry from one shayvach to another. And Rabbi Dosa comes along and says, no, you can't even do that. You could only carry it around inside the shayvach, but you can't carry it outside at all. Okay. So then the Mishnah had went on and said, Avol Mateu Mechalain Lechalain. That's even according to Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel Matirin. Okay, so Gemara says, Alma, we see Gabi Simchas Yamtav, Beis Shammai Lechumra, Beis Hillel Lekula. We see Beis Shammai is Lechumra. He says you cannot carry it from Shayvach. You cannot carry it from Shayvach to Shayvach. And Beis Hillel is Mekel. Or Mini, and we have a exterior to this from the first mission in the parak. You dig it into the earth with a shovel, with a spade, and you cover it. You cannot shecht. Unless you had dirt which was prepared from before Yom Tov, from the day before, literally when it was still day. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, you'll have to switch around our Mishnah over here. Taisus actually says you'll have to switch around the Mishnah in the beginning of the parak, in which case the first Mishnah in the parak we were saying was there's three kulais of Beis Shammai and chumas of Beis Hillel. According to Taisus, in fact, this halach will have to be switched around. Okay, so we'll go with Rashi though, that Rabbi Yochanan says you'll switch around our Mishnah over here. So Gemara says, Mimai, who says you have to switch around our Mishnah? Dilma adkan like Amri Beis Shammai Hasam. Maybe Beis Shammai over there is only Mekel. Elohecha dekika dakar notes, because there you have a spade stuck into the ground from earlier in the day. Elohecha deleka dakar notes. Like maybe where you didn't have a spade stuck into the ground from the beginning of the day, Beis Shammai will also be machmer. And also, so that answers Beis Shammai. And v'inami. Or also adkan like Amri Beis Hillel hacha, could be over here. Beis Hillel is only mekel, because the ladder you're using, it's clear that it's for a shayvach, and therefore you can move it around from one shayvach to another shayvach. No one will suspect you of plastering your roof. Aval hasam, but over there, like, but by Yom Tov, it's not. By Yom Tov, there's. It looks like you, So it looks like there's a. You might come to a Isser, Rashi says, of kasisha, of crushing the dirt. So we'll say it's aser. We'll be machmer by Yom Tov. So elai kasha ha kasha. So if there is a kasha where, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you'll have to switch around a Mishnah, the question comes from somewhere else. It comes from here. Beis Shammai Imrim, a different case, different Mishnah coming up. You're not allowed to take a bird, a check, ela imkein niyana mi ba'idai, unless you dealt with it. You literally shook it around, you touched it, the unfortunate say to feel if it's a good one for eating, for shechita tomorrow. So you have to go through them in order to check which ones are good. Yeah, so unless you if you handle them from the day before, I made Vaimer, you just stand up and say, Zevazeh, and I'm taking this one and this one. And that's good enough. And then there's no issue of muksa anymore. So Alma we see Gabi Simchas Yom Tov Beishamai L'Chomer or Beisel L'Kula. We see Beishamai is Machmer and Beisel is Mekel. Or Mini, and now we have a stira. Hajer Chai V'Aif B'Yom Tov. Right, we have our first Mishnah, which says that Beishamai is more Mekel. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan Muchlevas Ashita. You'll have to switch around that Mishnah, meaning the Mishnah of taking a bird, and do you have to handle them before Yom Tov or not? So Gemara says, maybe it's not true. Maybe you don't have to switch it around. Maybe to answer Beis Shammai, that maybe he's only makel where you have a shell stuck into the earth. If you don't have a shell stuck into the earth, no, he won't be makel. Inami, or also to answer Beis Hillel, Beis Hillel hacha, maybe Beis Hillel only is makel over here. Who, since it's only an issue of muksa, when you stand up and say, I'm just taking this one and that one, so that enough to take it away from muksa. Muksa is only an issue that if it's not set aside to be used for Yom Tov, so you can't use it. So if you say, I'll use these ones, that's good enough. So, Aval Hasam Lai. But over there, by Yom Tov, where it's a bigger problem of coming to crush earth, which could be an Isser Deraisa, an Xera because of an Isser Deraisa, so there, Beis Hillel will be Machmer. Okay.